Hey everybody, welcome back to our next edition of Thrive Time. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you today. I really enjoy these episodes so much because I really enjoy these particular episodes so very much because I really get to interact with all of you, and that really helps a great deal. I think that it's really great to stay in touch with what's going on. So I wanted to share some things before I jump into the Q&A process, and I want to remind you how it works. I know many of you are watching through the Zoom platform, and I know lots of you are also watching directly through YouTube and Facebook and so forth. For those of you who are backstage, in a sense, in the Zoom room, that's our live studio audience. In fact, let me show you our live studio audience. Where are they? They're here somewhere. Hello, live studio audience. In a second, you guys can wave to the camera. You're not on camera yet. Don't wave yet. Jeez. All right, there you go. Say hi to the live studio audience. There you guys all are on camera, live out to the world. And so if you ever want to join the live studio audience, the best thing to do is to go to the Thrive Time with Eric Edmeades Facebook group. And that's where you get all the backstage information about the episodes, the upcoming guests, and you kind of get to see the making of, and then you get to come and join directly in the Zoom where you can be asking questions. We have a limited number of spaces that we take into the live studio audience. So if you do click that link and you join that, then you can come into Zoom, but you'll first find yourself in the waiting room. And if the audience is full, then you'll be held in the waiting room until or unless there's a place for you to join. And what we recommend is that you just watch the show from Facebook or YouTube while you're waiting in the waiting room. But if you get connected to the show, it's really important you disconnect your Facebook or YouTube connection, because otherwise there'll be feedback and that won't be ideal. I just am hearing from our backstage audience for some reason that they're not hearing me in Zoom. Can I get a thumbs up from you guys if you can hear me in Zoom? But apparently they can hear me in Zoom, so maybe it was an outdated message. But anyway, here we are, ready to go. Make sure, those of you who are over in Zoom, that if you want to interact and jump on the show, which I really love, and I love getting to meet you guys, please click the link that the team has given you that will let you come in backstage, and then I can invite you directly in on the show. I want to remind you a little bit about the culture of that. It's really important that you are in a quiet place. It's no good if you're out in the car, there's traffic or noise in the house or any of that kind of stuff. It's also ideal if your camera is stationary. When you're using a phone and you're bouncing around, it makes it a tough viewer experience for the other people, and it's really great if you are front lit. So if you join in, then the culture of that is it's really ultimately for you to share something you think is really important that you've picked up from the show or some sort of breakthrough you've had. And then also if you've got a question that you'd like to dive into. So this is your opportunity to ask questions and speak with me directly. So please click that link to join us back in the show. I can see right now there's plenty of space still for people to join in live in the show, as there always is at the beginning. And then at the end, people complain that they didn't get in. So it's better if you do it early. All right, so before we jump in, I know that we already have our first guest is going to join us in a minute and ask a question. That's going to be Harry. I can see him already on deck. But before we get into that, there's something I've been wanting to talk about, rant about, rave about, or whatever, and that is conspiracy theories. I've had so many of my friends over this last week or so call me, write to me. I've had people, followers on Instagram writing to me going, I don't know what to do with all this noise. My friends are freaking me out and they're posting all kinds of stuff. And it's gotten to the place now, I think, that because there's so much fake news, generally speaking, out there in the world, we've gotten to a place where we feel like it's okay to post our own fake news out onto social media. And so I want to talk a little bit about the culture of that. I want to talk about what we do to manage our fear when those things are going on. And I want to address some of the direct conspiracy theories directly. Now, please understand, when we go to Q&A, you don't need to ask about that. This is just my little preamble at the beginning because it's what I feel like ranting about today. So here we go. Let's first talk about the general idea of conspiracy theories. I want to remind you of this. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean that they're not plotting against you. Do you hear me? Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean that they're not plotting against you. In other words, paranoia is a real thing. And I want you to know that some of our expressions in English are really funny. Like I hear people say, oh, I don't believe in coincidences. Okay, that drives me up the wall. That's like saying I don't believe in gravity. Coincidences happen. You went to the airport one day and you bumped into your friend there. That is a coincidence. It is a coincidence. Two incidents happening together. It's a coincidence. When you say you don't believe in coincidences, what you're saying is that you believe that nothing happens at the same time as anything else in the same place. They do all the time. What I think you mean to say is I don't believe that coincidences have no meaning and that we should be looking at those coincidences. And so it's the same thing with paranoia. When you're afraid or paranoid, it doesn't mean there's not something to be fearful or paranoid about. And so when these conspiracy theories come up, it plays into that for us. And so I want to talk a little bit about what I believe is really going on and how we can manage it best. First is, please don't post anything that you do not know to be factually true unless you disclaim it by saying, I'm interested in this, it's a theory, it's not a fact. But if you post stuff and speak strongly about it, you say, this is a fact when it's not a fact, well, then what you're doing is spreading fear and confusion. How many of you agree with me on this? Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, and I'm going to give you a really specific example. A very good friend of mine has been posting confusing facts and misfacts and information because she's infected by the fear. Right? So she's so fearful that she's reaching out. What happens is when people become afraid, then they become uncertain. And when they feel uncertain, they want to grab onto any certainty they can. I'll give you an example that's more common to us. People work in companies. And then sometimes they feel uncertain about the company. And so what do? They start gossiping. And because gossip is a way to feel certain. Oh, I have information. It gives people a sense of certainty. And so what happens right now with COVID-19 and the lockdown is that how many of you feel some uncertainty? I'm curious, anybody with uncertainty? Okay, so we feel a degree of uncertainty, which means that we are inclined to seek out certainty. And so the news knows this. The mainstream media, they're all over this. They completely get this. Because what they do is they create a lot of uncertainty with fake news or exaggerated headlines. And then what happens is because people are feeling uncertainty, they go, I feel uncertain, I'd better check the news. And they make money like you wouldn't believe. It's absolutely by design. And now our friends are doing it on social media. So what we need to do is post things that are real. So this friend of mine, she posted this fact, which she stated as a fact. Doctors have confirmed that COVID-19 is fake, that it's fake, that it doesn't even exist. She posted that as a fact. Then the next fact she posted was, doctors have confirmed that the mortality rate is in fact only 1% rather than the 3%. Incidentally, I believe it's a lot lower than that, and I'm going to come to that in a minute. But do you understand that those are two facts that are in conflict with each other? And does it make sense to you that makes no sense at all? Are you with me? Okay, that's a problem. And so what we want to do is post things that we know to be true and block people who don't. Because if you comment on it, that's the mistake I've made. I'm trying to help, so I comment. But then when I comment, I get the more clicks. I get more, and then Facebook goes, oh, look, this must be an interesting conversation. And then it spreads it even more. So I am a person who doesn't have the disease, but I'm still spreading the disease because I'm using social media irresponsibly. If somebody has a lot of fear, if they've got a lot of fear and they're sharing all their conspiracy theory stuff, they are more dangerous than somebody walking around threatening COVID or spreading COVID-19. When they post their fake stuff, they sneezed on you. Do you understand what I'm saying here? When they post the fake stuff, they just sneezed on you. You should then snooze them. If they sneeze on you, you snooze them. You just snooze them. Facebook has a feature, snooze friend for 30 days. You don't even have to unfriend them. All right. So that's my first rant about this, is please post real things. 5G may not be good. I will admit, I don't like all these electronic radio raves all over the place. I turn my Wi-Fi off. I get it. I'm not suggesting that 5G is a fabulous idea. I don't know the science. I won't post anything saying it's a bad idea, but I equally won't post anything saying it's a good idea. But what I will point out to you, two things about the 5G conspiracy that I really hope you understand. The one is the main guy propagating the theory His last theory was that the world is being run and managed by shape-shifting lizards in human skin. That's his last theory. I'm not kidding you. You can check it out for yourself. He was talking, and he got these videos online where they zoom in on people's eyes and they show, look, zoom in closely, you'll see it's really a reptile. I mean, this is the same guy that's getting millions of views and freaking everybody out because he's sneezing on millions of people at once. And people are afraid. Well, let me just give you one fact. One fact. And when I say fact, I'm not sure it's 100% accurate, but there are about 30 countries with 5G deployments. There are about 190 countries with COVID-19. Are we done with this now? It's not 5G. It's not. I'm not saying it's good for you, but it's not causing COVID-19. So let's deal with that. Now, boy, this is fun. So I'm so concerned because friends of mine, a very good friend of mine called me 4 days ago. And she says, I'm having anxiety attacks. And I said, why? And she goes, because two of our mutual friends keep posting this stuff about 5G and they're posting all this stuff about Bill Gates and they're scaring me. And I don't want to unfriend them because they'll know I unfriended them and I don't want to do that. You know, she was like, I could just unfriend them till the pandemic's over, but they'll see that we're unfriended. And I said, no, you can snooze them. You can totally snooze them. Think of it this way. If you knew they had a fever, would you give them a hug? No. If you knew they were sick, would you go visit them at their house? No. So if you know that they're affected, if you know they have a COVID-19 infection, then don't read their feed because then you might get infected. By the way, how many of you have been infected every now and again by posts like that where it got to you? How many of you have felt the infection coming in? Right. There you go. They are infecting you. And here's the problem. Once they've infected you, you start producing increased levels of cortisol. And you already were because of what's going on. And now it's more. And maybe even some adrenaline. And the more cortisol and adrenaline you're producing, the more fundamentally pessimistic you feel, which means you're more inclined to believe bad news. Do you understand the cycle here? That's the real pandemic. So now let's talk about a couple of other things that are related to this. How many of you currently, I'm curious, I'm really curious from the live studio audience, how many of you currently feel, I really need to know this, how many of you currently feel that Bill Gates is evil? I'm just curious, how many of you feel that he might be evil? Not so many from our audience, but out there in the world, how many of you know that friends of yours think that Bill Gates is evil? How many of you know your friends think he's evil? I'm going to explain a little bit why it is that people think that he's evil. One of the reasons that people think that he's evil is that in an interview some years ago, he was talking about the third world. He was talking about developing nations and the incredible population booms that they have in those places. And he made a comment in the interview that by introducing vaccines into those countries, it could reduce the population. And people grabbed a hold of that quote and said, see, Bill Gates is trying to kill people with vaccines. They're trying to kill people with vaccines. They're typing away on their computers. What he really said was that in the third world, there's a culture of having a great many children because you need to. I know we've talked about this before. I just want to really get it out. There's a culture of having 8 to 10 children because many of your children won't make it. So you need to have some children that are going to survive you out into retirement because they don't have pensions and stuff. And because many of your children won't make it, you have to preemptively have many children. Does this make sense so far? Are you guys all following me so far on this? Okay, so now what Bill Gates really said was when you introduce education, nutrition, and you prevent childhood diseases like malaria through prophylactic methods, including vaccines, the children start living longer, and so the parents are less inclined to have 8 to 10 children, and so the population can stop growing so quickly and can even reverse and get smaller. That's what he meant. That's it. That's what he meant. Now, the tin hat people have taken that one quote and said he's actually trying to poison people. Now, I will let you know, I am skeptical of some vaccines and vaccine companies. I am skeptical of hearing that the CDC may own a bunch of vaccine patents and stuff, and that stuff worries me. But we can't even have a real conversation about it if we start the conversation with a lie. The minute we start the conversation with a lie that Bill Gates is a shape-shifting reptile who's intentionally sterilizing people to reduce, no, we're not going to have a real conversation anymore. It's not real anymore because we started it with a lie. What we need to do is start with the truth. And so again, I come back to you. Please don't post stuff unless you know that it's true or unless you're asking a question about it. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the lockdown. I want to talk a little bit about the lockdown because I am seeing a lot of division now. There are some people who believe that the lockdown should be over. There are some people who believe that the lockdown should never have happened. And there are other people who believe the lockdown should be enforced and we should carry on with it. And you know what the trouble is? None of us really know if we're right. That's really a big part of the difficulty right now. None of us really know if we're right about that. We don't know. And the reason we don't know is the data is still coming. You know, we're still getting the data. But I want to share with you a couple of observations that I have. I am fascinated by the experiment that Sweden is conducting. And in fact, Sweden, they're the first ones to point out that it's not them conducting the experiment because they're just carrying on relatively as business as usual as they've done for every other disease that's ever swept along. We're the ones conducting the experiment around the world by shutting down our economies and locking everybody up at home. That's a fascinating idea. But in order to really measure what's going on, in order to really understand what's going on, one number that's very important. You might think that it's deaths or infections, but that number is not so important in absolute terms because countries have different sized populations. So if you compare the number of people that have passed away in Sweden with the number of people who have passed away in America, that doesn't give you anything to look at because there's different. You'd have to factor it in as a percentage of the population. And so the number that we use for that is called deaths per million. Now, yes, Sweden is very high on the deaths per million. I think they're number 5 in the world right now. They're number 5 in the world behind Holland, behind Belgium, behind a number of countries, and they're only just ahead of the United States. Now, that may seem like a bad thing. It may seem bad that they're very high on the death per million number, but I will point out to you that they're half of the death per million that they're having in the Netherlands and Belgium. Half of it, and they haven't shut down their entire world. They haven't shut down their economy. So it begs the question, but then we have to point out something else, and that is that both the Netherlands and Belgium, as examples, have incredibly high population density numbers. When you're dealing with infectious diseases, population density is a major part of the conversation. It's a major part of the conversation because the more densely people are populated, the easier it is to spread the disease. So you can't really compare Sweden with those countries. You just can't do that. But you can still look at the deaths per million as an overall against all countries. And what I would suggest to you is that we're in a place right now where places that have very high population density should probably be maintaining really severe lockdown. They should be because they've got super high population density. Look what's happened in New York. Look what's happened in the population dense areas in Italy and other places around the world. In the places that are more rural and more spread out, I believe it would be reasonable now for the lockdown regulations to start to lift. And I think we will start to see that because when there's less population density, there's less of a problem. And there's one more thing that I think about Sweden, in case you're curious what I think about Sweden, and that is we've all been, how many of you have heard we need to flatten the curve? We need to flatten the curve. Okay. But I think one of the things that you've probably noticed through this whole pandemic is that what we hear one week becomes irrelevant in the next week. How about this? I thought about this over the weekend during one of our programs. When's the last time you heard somebody tell you not to touch your face? But do you remember all the rage was don't touch your face, right? Don't touch your face. Well, you know what? I'm going to touch. They don't tell us not to touch our face anymore. That news is now old news. With masks, we've been told, yes, you should wear your mask. No, you shouldn't wear your mask. You want me to confuse you fully? I'll do it right now. If you wear the mask, you can stop yourself from infecting other people. Also, if you wear the mask, you breathe a warm, wet environment inside this place where bacteria can breed and get into your own respiratory system and cause a bacterial infection. Are you confused about masks? I am. We keep getting confusing information about this. And what I want to suggest to you is that the concept of flattening the curve might be the next one. Because in order to understand flattening the curve, you need to understand the shape of the curve to begin with. And the reason for flattening the curve, which is a very good reason and I support it, the reason for flattening the curve was to reduce the burden on hospitals, But wait a second now. Remember what you were hearing all about a few weeks ago in the hospitals? Ventilators, we need more ventilators. We got to have more ventilators. What are you not hearing about anymore? Ventilators. They're now suggesting ventilators are not the solution and in fact are a problem. So the information is changing all the time. And so I want to talk a little bit about flattening the curve because you see, Sweden has a higher death per million number than, say, America. But will they still have that higher number at the end of a year? Will they? Because what I want to suggest to you is that if you've got this curve and then you push down on the top of it to flatten it, you broaden it as well. Do you understand what's going on? In other words, quite conceivably, roughly the same number of people die. They just die on a different time frame. And I think that what we're going to see with Sweden is that they have not flattened the curve as much as they could have if they observed even more social distancing and maybe a lockdown, but that over this course of a year, their death per millions number will be about the same as anybody else's without having shut down their economy, without having shut down their country. Now, it might sound to you like I'm saying I'm against the lockdown. I'm not. I'm trying to point out that each country needs to find the solution based on their culture and based on their population density. If you have a state like California, or let's talk about Florida. If you have a state like Florida, which in my opinion has a fairly dense population in both meanings of the word. Some of the population is dense because they live close to each other, and some of the population is dense because they insist on having spring break vacations in the middle of a breakdown. So they have population density and population density. They should be observing a lockdown. The infectiousness of the disease seems to be related to three things: your fundamental health, the density of your population, and the density of the people in your population. And so every country needs to take a different view on the way they're doing it. And if we're going to be talking about this stuff in social media, I think what we should do is do enough research that when we share stuff, we can offer an opinion that at least has a little backing behind it. And so I thought I'd go in and dig into these things and answer the questions because people have been asking me about them. So that's my rant on conspiracy theories and lockdowns and 5G and lizard people, and for this episode of Thrive Time. And now we're gonna go over and we're gonna talk to some of you. And guys, we can totally talk about more about conspiracy theories or anything at all that's going to help you have a better lockdown experience and prepare you for the post-pandemic world. Harry, our original fan, you're our first guest today. Harry, say hello.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, I hope you hear me.
I hear you.
I had a fantastic seminar over the weekend, and I
Thank
actually
you.
have a question regarding that. The homework regarding goals and desires, and now especially with the lockdown being home and thinking about the future and trying to be a better person coming out of it. How do you get away from the fear of setting too high goals? I know that in the seminar you talked about it with the sentence of "wouldn't it be nice," but still, like when I was writing down that what the 1 year in the future person would write what I did, it's still difficult to write down concrete numbers or stuff because I am afraid to be disappointed in myself, because it's better to be surprised about the good outcome than disappointed about the real outcome. And that's also always my problem with the manifestation and law of attraction, that nobody talks about those failures when they wanted something by that time, but they never got it.
All right. So I want to describe law of attraction in a kind of cute, funny way that I often think about it. The first thing, for those of you who are interested in law of attraction, how many of you guys are interested in law of attraction and The Secret and that kind of stuff? You know, some people totally, some people not at all. So here's the thing. First thing is that for any of you who watched The Secret, you need to know it was heavily edited, and a lot of what was edited out of it was the part about you doing stuff. Like the part where you actually had to take action. There was a lot of that kind of taken out. So when we're talking about manifestation, when we're talking about creating reality, when we're talking about attracting the things into our lives that we want, there's always going to be action involved. And then the other thing about attraction is that I believe attraction is a way of being, not necessarily a way of doing. In other words, the happier you are as a person, the more optimistic, the easier you are to be around, the more you will attract things to you. So that's the first level that I want to suggest to you. The happier you are, the more you are doing what you love to do, the more people will want to do it with you, the more people will want to buy from you, and so on. Does this make sense to everybody? Okay, cool. So now let's do this. With regard to your specific question, what happens for many of us is we set a goal, and we set limited goals because we feel if we set the bigger goal and then we fail, then we're going to have hurt ourselves, and we're going to feel failure, and we're going to feel rejection. So, that's kind of a problem, right? That's a bit of a problem. Hang on one second, guys. I'm hearing... Oh, I understand. Guys, you'd think I'd have learned by now that you guys can't hear my guests. Is that what's going on? All right. Harry, could you say hello to everybody? Because they haven't even heard your voice yet. Say hello.
Hello.
Are we good? All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you. So sorry about that. Sometimes when you're in live studio audience, there are advantages. Sometimes there are disadvantages. So, all right. So what happens is that people set this goal, and they're like, all right, I want to set a goal. And then they limit it down. They limit the goal down because they're afraid that if they set too big a goal and then they don't hit it, that they're going to face a feeling of failure, rejection, and all that kind of stuff. All right. So first thing I'd like to suggest is if you set a really big goal and you work really hard toward it and you do all the right things and you achieve a lot, but you don't achieve the big goal, have you achieved a lot? Yeah, like, the old expression about that, Harry, is if you shoot for the moon, you might miss, but you'll at least end up with the stars, right? So there are times when you want to set a big goal, and you set the big goal, and you work toward it, and you miss, but you still got the journey. You see, because it's not just about the destination. It's about the journey and the rewards that come along on the journey. Is it possible that somebody sets this goal to create a bestseller? Great. So they set the goal to have a bestseller. And by the way, that's a big goal. To become a New York Times bestseller is a big goal. So they set out to become a New York Times bestseller, Harry. And they write away, and they write. And they edit, and they get a cover designed, and they do all this, and they launch the book. And it doesn't become a New York Times bestseller. I mean, that's terrible. But it landed them a bunch of speaking gigs. It got them interviews on the radio. It got them, money raised for their company. They helped hundreds and thousands of people, but they didn't become a New York Times bestseller. So, Harry, have they failed? No, I don't think so. Now I've lost your sound, Harry. I think maybe you muted yourself.
No, I was. I muted.
I got you. So I got you. So they haven't failed. They haven't failed at all. Now they've kind of failed in the ultimate objective. But you know what? For years, I used to take people up Kilimanjaro as part of a leadership program. We take them up. I thought, I really am a big fan of using metaphors to teach. And I thought, wow, Kilimanjaro is like the ultimate metaphor to teach people about themselves. And so I was like ready, take them up Kilimanjaro. And the one thing I had to prepare myself for was that not everybody was going to make it to the top. In fact, about 1/3 of the people that set out to summit Kilimanjaro actually get to the top of Kilimanjaro. So I need to be ready that a lot of my people might not reach the ultimate summit, and I was going to need to reframe that for them so they could see that life is like that somewhere. Now, the good news is that the preparation work that we did with them psychologically made it so that over our 7 expeditions, we averaged 90% of our people to the top of the mountain. 90%. How cool is that? Very, very cool. Mm-hmm. But that's still not 100%. And that meant that every year, except one, because I think one year we did get 100%, but every year, there was always 1 or 2 people that didn't make it to the summit. And do you know what they told me, Harry? It was good. It was cool. They got the life lessons they were meant to have. They were so glad that they came on the adventure. They were so glad that they walked up that mountain. They were so glad for the friendships they created and the sights that they saw. And yes, they have a little sweet sorrow that they didn't get to the summit. But ultimately, it wasn't a failure. Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Okay.
I have to enjoy the process more.
Exactly. And now one more thing. And this is my crazy off-color metaphor. But this is the other thing, is that attachment is sometimes part of the problem. When we get too attached to a goal, it's too, like the more we're like grabbing onto it and we've got this grabby attachment feeling to it, the more that goal wants to run away from you. Does that make sense? Let me explain exactly what I mean. Have any of you had that experience where there's something that you really want and it seems like the harder you grab at it, the more it runs away? Who's had that? I have a great metaphor for you. Here's how it works, Harry. The metaphor is this. Harry, have you ever been in a situation where there was, let's say a physical experience you wanted to have in your body, a physical experience you wanted to have in your body, and the more you wanted that physical experience to come, like the pressure was building, you wanted the physical experience to happen in your body, but the more you wanted it, the more it seemed to escape away. And the more pressure you felt to feel that feeling, the more it escaped and went away. Have you ever had that feeling, Harry?
Yes.
Right. I'm talking about sneezing, right? Sneezing, like when the sneeze is coming up. What were you guys thinking in the studio audience? Karen, I need to know what you had in mind. I don't know. Karen, I was talking about sneezing. But the thing is the more the sneeze builds up in your body, you get to that point where it's like, oh, come on, sneeze, please. And the more you want it, it just disappears. Goals are like that sometimes. And by the way, Karen, so are orgasms. I know. So what I want to say is that we want to have our goals and relax into them. And by the way, if we're going to go, because of, I know Leslie, Karen, I saw all of you. I saw you reacting. But here's what I want you to know. We can talk about that exact issue because the more pressure in somebody's sex life, the more pressure they feel to get to the ultimate destination, the harder it is for them to get there. The worst thing in the world that a man or a woman can do, or whatever, it doesn't matter who's involved and who's in the room, but if it's a heterosexual couple, the more pressure the man puts on the woman to get there, the harder it is for her to get there. Women, come on, raise your hand if that's true. All right? But it's the same for men. The more pressure there is to get there, the harder it is to get there. And your subconscious is very much like that with goals as well. So if you get this strong sense of attachment to the goal, and you really put a lot of pressure on it, and you start feeling needy, then the goal will wisp away from you. And that's why we talk about, wouldn't it be nice? You can set the goal. My goal is to write a book. And wouldn't it be nice if it was a bestseller on the New York Times? And then you can release some of that pressure. And it's like somebody saying to you, Harry, relax. There's no hurry here. Take your time and just enjoy the process. And then it'll be a lot easier for you to write the book. Harry, it's been a pleasure as always to share this experience with you. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show. All right. Well, it seems like we're definitely going we're coloring outside the lines today, everybody. We are now going to be going over to, let's see, who do I hear? I have, I think Ragna, if I'm saying it correctly. Hold on. I've got you coming in. I just need to get a little faster at being the producer here. Here you go. Ragna, please say hello to everybody. Say hello.
Hi.
So good to have you.
Hear me?
They can hear you, I'm pretty sure. We can get a thumbs up to confirm, but let's see. Have we got her? We do. We've got her. All right.
Okay. So my question is more or less about changing someone else's habits and beliefs, because the situation I'm in right now is that my stepdad is really destroying his life and the relationship with my mother. And I know that the person first has to realize it on their own that they need to change. But in this case, we really need to make him realize that he needs to change, because if he doesn't, then things are not going to end fine.
All right. This is a very tough one. This is a very, very tough one. And it kind of crosses the line a little bit, because we start getting into this question of at what point are we responsible for other people's experience, right? I mean, it's a really tough one. How many of you out there have ever wanted to change somebody else's habits or behaviors? Okay, let me ask another question. How many of you, in your attempt to help somebody change their habits or behaviors, have harmed a relationship? Anybody done that? Right. So it's a bit like this. The first thing I want to suggest about it is that rather than trying to stimulate the change, you try to stimulate the curiosity about the change. So instead of pushing, you try to pull. Instead of like pressuring somebody, you try to lead by example, and you try to live the way that you want them to live, and to let them see by example what that looks like, and allow them to have some curiosity about it. We see this very often with WildFit clients, where a husband or wife does the program and the other one is like not down, doesn't want to be involved, not interested, not going on another diet. That's ridiculous, stupid, da, 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 da. And then 3 months later, they've signed up, they've lost 30 pounds, their life is transformed. But the reason that it worked was the husband or wife that was on the program didn't go, come on, you got to do it. You got to sign. It's so good. They don't do that because we tell them not to. We tell them to simply live the way they want to be. We tell them to be the change they want to see in their partner. So I think that's a really big clue as to how this has to happen. But here's the other one, and it's really tough. And it's kind of related to what we were just talking about with Harry. And that is, the more you want something, the harder you make it for the other person to get there. It's the strangest thing at all. But the more you want it for them, the more, I mean, look, have you ever had this experience where a friend of yours says, oh, you got to read this book, you got to read this book. And the more they tell you to read the book, the more you're just not reading the book? Have you ever had that? It's just, it's challenging. And so what I want to suggest is this, is that with your children, for example, when you've got kids, sometimes you just have to let them fall down. Sometimes you just have to let them hurt themselves a little bit. Sometimes you just have to let them have that experience. And that's how they're going to develop the life experience. And so when you have a partner or a friend that's headed down a tough road, what I suggest is you be the example that you want them to be. You try to stimulate their curiosity about it. And then you let go. You let go, and you let God, and you let life, and you let it happen for them. You be there for them to help them pick up the pieces. But here's the tough part. Let's imagine that somebody's married to an alcoholic and they want to support the alcoholic to change. Then they might be tempted to hide the alcohol. This is a very common thing that spouses will do. That, well, if there was no alcohol around, they wouldn't drink it. Let me tell you something. Alcoholics can find alcohol in the Sahara Desert. So hiding it is not going to help. It's not going to help. But then the next thing you might start to do is go, well, I know that he was unacceptable, that his behavior was unacceptable at the last party, but then you try to explain away his behavior. You try to cushion the fall. Or you're at the party and he starts behaving in a bad way, so you try to get him to leave the party to prevent him having the embarrassment. Well, you know what the problem with that is? It's that very embarrassment, and it's those consequences that might have driven him to stop. And so every time you try to soften the blow, you actually prevent the transformation. So I'm not sure exactly what the situation you're talking about is, but what I want to suggest is be the change you want to see, work to stimulate the example, work to stimulate curiosity, and then let them live, and maybe be there to help them pick up the pieces. Does that help?
It does a little, but yeah, the bigger problem is that even his own kids who are 7 years old don't believe in himself, and if he makes a promise, they're like, "You're not gonna do it anyway."
Yeah.
So it really hurts to hear that.
Are we talking? When you say his kids, are they your kids too?
No. They're my half brother and sister. Yeah.
Okay, so you're a relative, which on one level makes you the ultimate person to want to help and support, and on the other level, it makes you one of the hardest people to help and support, because we're like that with family. And, really all I can suggest to you is the kind of things that I've said so far. And then the other one is brutal, honest communication. Sometimes that's what it takes. You guys have all had, seen this thing where people do like interventions, right? You do an intervention and you all sit around and talk to the person about the reality. Well, sometimes you can have a one-on-one intervention where you just have a sit down and you have a conversation. You say, listen, I love these kids as much as I know you love them, and I'm a little bit concerned. And you try to have an outright, frank conversation. The problem for a lot of us is that we will often, again, try to soften the blow. We'll try to say it nicely. I'm often in this situation where somebody looks to me for coaching help. Like, I will never forget years ago, many, many years ago, I was teaching a workshop on public speaking, and one of the women in the group She was talking about, wanting to become a public speaker and all this kind of stuff. And I said to her, like, what do you want to teach? And she says, I want to talk about women's health. I want to talk about women dating and women's health and all that kind of stuff. And here's the thing. I'm sitting in a room with 150 people, and I've got this woman telling me she wants to be a public speaker and talk about women's health. She was dressed in a stained pair of sweatpants and a baggy sweatshirt with food on the front of it. Her hair was everywhere. She was carrying 50 pounds that she doesn't need to be carrying. And here's the problem. I'm a white dude at the front of the stage, and she was also mixed race, right? So she's got all this stuff. And if I'm a white dude at the front of the stage, and if I turn to her and go, hey, maybe you need to lose some weight, now I'm fat shaming her, and I'm an evil man and all that kind of stuff, right? That's kind of what's going on. But what I can tell you is that in my environment, in my events, in my tribe, my clients know that I'm not very nice. That's just the truth of it. They just know that come on, how many of you know that I'm not very nice? Really, if you really get down, be honest, but what they know is that what I really mean by that is that I'm not very nice in the short term in order to be nice in the long term. I'm willing to say what needs to be said. I'm willing to say what needs to be said, and I can say it with love, and I did with this woman. I said to her, listen, I want you to achieve your goal. I just want you to know you're here at a public event. It was a public speaking event. You knew that the microphones are going to be passed around the room. And I want you to think a little bit about your appearance in this situation. You want to talk to people about women's health. Well, if you want to talk to people about women's health, you need to be a glowing example of women's health. By the way, does that mean she needs to be a swimsuit model? No. No woman who's interested in women's health and weight loss wants a bikini swimsuit model as their coach. That's just too much to deal with. They don't want that. They want a real woman. Right? So I'm not saying I'm not fat shaming her. I'm not telling her I'm just saying she needs to be healthy. And then I said, and also I want you to look at the way you're dressed right now. I know it's an event. But it's an event, which means it's a networking event, which means there's potential clients here and you're in these sweatpants. And I said, so I just want you to think about that. Now, that's not very nice things to say to a person, but the context was such that I created the environment to say it. And that's the question. Can you create that environment? Do you have the mutual love and respect with this person to be able to have that conversation? Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Then maybe that's the deal. Maybe that's what needs to happen is you need to have a sit down, heart to heart, but you need to understand something. It's not your life. And I want you to know something about those kids. They're going to be just fine. They are. Come on. I mean, the only people, if I'm really, I hate to say this out loud, but honestly, some of the most screwed up people I've ever met had perfect childhoods. I'm telling you, if your childhood is too easy, your life is going to be hard. If your school life is too easy, your life is going to be hard. Some of the most dynamic and amazing and phenomenally interesting people I know went through awful childhoods. That's why they ended up like this. That's where they got their sense of humor from. That's how they ended up being, they got their life skills. So these kids, for all you know, this is their destiny. Their destiny is to have a weird relationship with their father where it doesn't quite work out right. How many of you in the studio audience know that part of the reason that you're interesting, part of the reason you've had an interesting life, there may be bad stuff too, but part of the reason that you've had some interesting stuff is because there was some stuff your parents didn't totally get right. How many of you know that that's true? Oh, look, it's almost everybody. So take it easy. The kids are going to be okay. They're going to be okay. So anyway, I hope that is of some assistance and help to you. I want you to relax, maybe have the heart to heart, be the example you want to be, and then chill out and let the kids have their upbringing and let them have their relationship.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for being on the show. Okay, all right. How fun is that? We are going to go to our next person. In the meantime, I really want to share something with you that kind of is related to what I was talking about. Is that I really had, in many senses, a very imperfect upbringing myself. Things weren't easy for me growing up at all in many ways. But you know what's really fascinating about that for me is that it worked for me. I'm having a sound issue. Okay, I've got you. It worked for me. Like, I went through some really tough stuff as a kid, stuff that I would never, ever want one of my own children to go through, not in a million years. But in the meantime, I I learned as a result of it. This thing happened over here, and I had to develop coping skills for that, and those coping skills ended up supporting me later on. And so I want everybody to remember that it's not meant to be easy. It sometimes is meant to be tough. And to the degree that you can develop a powerful sense of gratitude for even the tough stuff you went through, you'll find the rest of your life gets a whole lot easier. If you look back at your life, how many, I'm curious now, how many people out there have had bumpy pasts? Where you think of your past as being a little bit bumpy, right? So if the road behind you is bumpy, then you might be naturally expecting that the future in front of you is going to be bumpy too. Does that make sense? But here's my question. Is bumpy bad? I tell you, I don't think so. I just get a 4x4. I like bumpy. I'm in for it. I'm down for it. Let's have some bumpy. Anyway, with that, we've got Daisy coming into us live. Daisy, you're on the show. Say hello to everybody.
Hey, hi everyone. So my question is actually a little bit related to Harry's question regarding law of attraction. I know that dreams can come true, and I know that my brain knows, because I've seen it like many times. I've been asking for something or wishing for something, it has come true. But recently I found that my little brain sends out a sabotaging thought, which is, are they really gonna come true? And I haven't found that question before, but now it's kind of every time I wish for something, it starts to come in, and I have like a lot of question marks.
Yeah, if everything was easy, it wouldn't be worth doing. If everything was certain, it wouldn't be doing. One of my favorite little jokes, I'll share with you. It's one of my favorite little jokes. It kind of goes like this. This guy, he dies, and he ends up, he's not quite sure whether he's going to heaven or hell, because he lived a kind of on the edge life, a little too much of this, a little too little of that, and he's not really sure. And so there he arrives in the afterlife, and he finds himself in a limousine. And he's in this incredible limousine. He's like, oh my God, I'm in a limo. I think that, and then the limousine pulls up, and he's in Las Vegas. It's his favorite place in the world. Oh my God, he made it to heaven. There's this gorgeous casino, and these beautiful women come out from the casino, and they welcome him to the casino, and they walk him into the casino, and they offer him a drink right away. And it's like, oh, I'm so glad I made it. The fire, I was so terrified of the fire and the brimstone. I was so afraid of hell, but I'm here, I made it. And they're like, well, what would you like to do, sir? What would you like to do? And he goes, blackjack. Let's go play some blackjack. Let's go. And they head off to the blackjack table, and they're there at the blackjack table, and they're playing, and he wins the first hand. Right away, he wins the first hand. It's amazing. So this is so cool. He plays again, and he wins the second hand. Blackjack. And then he plays again, third hand. Blackjack. 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 He gets bored with playing blackjack, so he heads over to the roulette table, and he wins the first round, his son! And then the second one. And then the third one. And then he gets bored with roulette, and he goes over to the craps table. Same thing. Cannot throw a bad roll. Can't throw a bad roll, wins everything. But after about 5 or 6 hand rolls, not interested. At this point, he says, I'd like to talk to the manager, please. I'd like to talk to the manager. We need to talk to the manager. And they're like, okay, let's get the manager for you. And the manager comes over. Manager's like, okay, sir, what can I do? How can I help you? What's the issue here? And he says, well, I'm really struggling. This is just not my idea of heaven. And the manager says, you're not in heaven, son. Daisy, you don't want it to be easy. You think you do. But the truth is, the reason people go to Las Vegas and gamble is because they lose. Because if they didn't lose, the winning wouldn't feel so good. And so the next time you think of some goal and you realize that you could lose, get excited. Get excited. Let me just ask you something. Does food taste better when you're full or when you're hungry?
When you're hungry.
Does food taste better when you're hungry or when you're famished? Starving.
Famished. Yeah, famished.
The hungrier you are, the tastier it is. And there's so many things that are like that in life. There are many things that the longer you don't have it, the more you enjoy it when you have it. And I know what some of you are thinking based on our earlier phone call. I wasn't even thinking of that. But the point being is that I want you to be okay that it's going to be a bumpy road. You just make sure you're driving a 4x4, and then you're not going to have a problem.
True.
Give me an example.
Okay.
Give me an example. Like think of a goal that's so big and it makes you a little bit scared and a little bit nervous.
Probably financial freedom.
Okay. What does that mean for you?
It means that I don't have to handle money because it has like a cash flow. So money generates money.
Okay.
Sense of that you can do whatever you want to.
Okay. So I'll give you a quick little discussion about money. This might be helpful for you. This is the way I think about money. It's the way we teach money at our workshops. There are different levels of financial freedom. So the first level is basic survival. And what that means is that you have enough money saved away in the bank that, I don't know, pick some random unlikely event. Like imagine that there was some kind of strange global pandemic lockdown and you couldn't work. I mean, I know nothing like that would ever happen, but if it did, then if you had 3 months of money where you can pay your basic living expenses saved in the way of bank, you have a basic level of financial security. And by the way, the people who have that, they're very grateful at the moment, aren't they? They're nervous about what comes next, but they're grateful. There are many people who don't have that. Most people don't even have that, particularly in America. They don't even have that. Most people are 1 month to 1 month. So level 1 is you've got that basic level of financial security. Then level 2 is a real sense of financial security. And that's where you have the same thing, 12 months worth of money of your basic living expenses, 12 months. If you have 12 months worth of money of your basic living expenses, now you've got, like, the first one is like basic financial safety. Then there's financial security at that 12 months level. Okay. Now the next level is where you have level 1 of financial freedom. It's not full freedom, but it's a level of it. And that's where you have enough money that you have 12 months of your actual living expenses in the bank. Actual living expenses. Remember, the first one is just 12 months of basic, like your rent, your food. You're not going out for meals. You're not taking Uber. You're basic. But at this third level, you have enough money that you have 12 months worth of your actual living expenses. This means if you should get sick or you lose your job or you just want to take a year off, you've got your first level of financial freedom. Does that make sense? Okay. Next level of financial freedom is where you have enough money and investments invested that you have income from those investments that will pay your basic monthly living expenses. This is the first true level of financial freedom. So you have enough money and investments that give enough income. It could be property, stocks, bonds, a business. If you have enough money that your investments are giving you enough money to pay your basic monthly expenses, not your living expense, just your rent, food, not luxuries. That's that next level. Then the next level after that is where you have enough investments that you have enough income to pay your actual living expenses the way you want to live. So you have enough income coming in, you can go to the movies, you can go on vacation, because you've got enough income coming in that you don't have to work. That's real financial freedom. And then there's a couple more levels. I'm only going to do one more. There's one more level after that. And that's where you have enough investments that you have income coming in to live the way you want to live. Not just the way you're living, but the way you want to live. The house you want to live in, the vacations you want to have, the car you want to drive, the charities you want to be able to give to. So these are different levels of financial security. Here's my question. Do you have to jump all the way to the end level first? No, you don't at all. You don't have to. So what I want you to do is I want you to write down those levels and I want you to work your way through them. Because do you believe that level 1 is possible for you, where you could have enough money, where you could just have 3 months of expenses in the bank? Is that possible?
Yeah, of course, I have done that.
There it is. There you go. Look at that. Check 1. Awesome. You've already succeeded. By the way, what I'm doing with her is very similar to what I've described to many of you before with your to-do lists. In the same way that you add, I know you do this. Come on, let's have some honesty. You have a to-do list. then you do something that wasn't on the to-do list, then you add it to the to-do list anyway, and then you tick it off. Who does this? It's a weird little psychological thing, but what you're really doing is you're trying to tap into the biochemistry of success. I'm doing that now with Daisy because I'm saying, look, you already have level 1. Now let's go to level 2 where you have 12 months worth of expenses. Once you've got that 12 months, now let's go to level 3 where you've got enough investment income to pay your basic living expenses, and so on and so on. And so now you've got a ladder to climb instead of a simple place to be. And then it'll be a lot. Does this make it feel easier? It makes it feel more manageable. And then this, and what's really crazy is, check it out. Let's say your ultimate goal is to get to that final level. You want to get to that total final level. Okay, you're going to get to that total final level. Here we go. Oh, but you fail. Oh, you failed and you didn't get to the final level. But you got to the level just below that where you have enough money to live a great life. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, of course.
All right then. There you go.
The journey has been good at least, isn't it?
Good. Yeah, and the destination wasn't so bad either.
No,
well done.
not
That's
at
a
all.
great topic. Thanks for bringing that to us. That was really good stuff.
I have actually one more question.
Go for it.
Quickly. How to stop self-destructive behavior? I'm doing it regarding if I feel really low or really high, like emotionally. Either I'm really sad or lonely, or I'm very, very happy. I kind of go into the self-destructive behavior in a sense of there's certain things I cannot eat and I actually go for them, or certain activities which I should not actually do, like procrastination, for example. So I start to kind of self-destruct myself when I'm feeling badly. So how to stop this? How, I know, get over it, but in a
Oh, no,
sense,
no,
like,
it's not get over it. It's not get over it. I have another one for you. One for you. You might want to write this down. It's not get over it. Are you ready? Okay, I have another one for you. Very powerful technique. It's not the get over it technique that you learned on the weekend. This is another one. You might want to write this down. Stop it! Just stop it! Okay. I learned that from the great Bob Newhart. But here's the thing. What I want you to understand is that when you do a behavior like that, to feel better, you know that you're actually making yourself feel worse. And so then you're going to need to do the behavior again so you can feel better, but really feel worse. So here's the question I want to ask you, or I want you to ask yourself. Tell me one of the foods. Tell me one of the foods that you go to.
usually candy or pastry.
Candy or pastry. By the way, have you? I assume you haven't done WildFit.
No, I haven't done it yet.
I assume that because we wouldn't be having this conversation if you had. And I don't mean that as a shameless plug. Okay, I totally mean that as a shameless plug. So you said candies or pastries. So there's two ways I want to attack this with you. One is I want to ask you a very important question about candies and pastries. How do they make you feel?
In the moment.
In the
Good?
moment. Yeah, no, not just good. Tell me really how they make you feel. You're feeling low. You give yourself permission to have a pastry. How do you feel?
Excellent.
Excellent. It's not just good. It's excellent. By the way, when do you start feeling excellent? When do you start feeling it? When does the excellent begin?
From the first bite. So
Really? See, I don't think so. I don't think that that's true. Let's try it out. Let's just try it out. I want you to pretend right now that you're feeling low, okay? Think back to a time when you were feeling quite low. And then I show up at your house and I've got pastries. When do you start feeling excellent?
When I see them.
That's right. It's not the pastry that's making you feel excellent. It's the permission. It's the rebellion. It's the lie that somebody taught you as a child that pastries make you feel excellent. Because guess what? You were crying one day and they gave you a pastry to make you feel better. And so pastries equal love. And so the pastry isn't actually what makes you feel better. It's the rebellion. So you're feeling low. Oh, I'm so low. I could have a pastry. And immediately you start producing serotonin and dopamine. You start feeling good. And then you eat the pastry. And then you link up the good to the pastry. That's the problem. So in the future, what I really want you to do, matter of fact, How many let's just have a moment of like this week. How many pastries would you probably eat? Be honest. Tell us what's really going on.
I usually don't eat them. Like I'm very good with, yeah,
Okay.
I'm really good. So this week, no, but last week, yes. But I
Okay.
have eaten candy.
Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to eat pastries this week. I want you to at least 3 of them.
Okay.
I want you to eat 3 of them. And I want you to eat them at a time when you don't want them. I do. I want you to eat them at a time that you don't want them. At a time when you normally wouldn't have it. I want you to eat 3 pastries. And then I want you to make sure you're back on the show next week because I want to check in with you and see how it went. I want you to eat 3 pastries at a time when you don't want them. So you can't eat them when you normally would. You got to eat them at some other time. All right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's give that a try, and maybe we'll check in with you next week. Kelsey, let's make a note that we see if we can get Daisy back on the show next week and find out how her pastry adventure went.
I will come back. I want to see how it ends because this really needs to end because it's not good for my health at all.
Well,
Daisy,
let me ask you one more thing. Do you really, really want to change it?
Yeah, of course.
I'm gonna just I'm just gonna say this to you. WildFit works. Go do our 14-day challenge. It's like $30. Go do it. You'll save that much in pastries alone afterward. Like, go do it. Go do it. And then and if it works for you, then do the full 90 days. You will absolutely change your life. By the way, studio audience, how many of you guys would recommend, like with what you know, honestly, only honest recommendation, how many of you would recommend she does this? Yeah, there you go. It's pretty clear. It's pretty clear. So I hope you'll give that a try. But in the meantime, let's try out pastries this week, and I'll see you on the show next week.
Okay, awesome.
Daisy, have an excellent week. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
You're very, very welcome. I would now like to invite Indriani. I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Indriani, but it's so good to have you here. Say hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Should I ask my questions?
Yes, you should ask your question. This would be a good time.
Okay.
You are live. There could be millions of people watching. Don't be nervous.
Great. So how do I let go of the past experiences or past relationship and open up to a new relationship?
Wow, that's a great one. And the first thing is, I don't know that you really want to let go of it. It was an experience you had, and it's a cherished part of your past, and it had ups and downs, probably. What I think you really want to do is let go of the pain of it. Does that make sense? I don't know what happened. I lost your sound. Hello?
Yes.
Hi, I lost your sound. Did that make sense, what I said?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear you if you want.
Okay, guys on my team, we gotta not go like we gotta have people stable, solid, good. Do the best you can. I know it's difficult with the world out there. So what I'm saying to you is that what often happens to us is that we see a relationship ending as a failure, and what I want to suggest to you is that it's not necessarily the best way to look at a relationship. In fact, there's a really great relationship expert that talks about this, a colonist, and he says some really cool stuff about this. He says the way we measure marriage these days is the only way to have a successful marriage is to die while married. That's the only way to have a successful marriage is die while married. You could, if you find out that this couple made it to their 75th wedding anniversary and then they died together, it was a successful marriage. We know that automatically without asking them anything about how the marriage was. And I just don't think that's a good measure. It's not how I would want to measure it. And then he says, isn't it entirely possible that you instead have a really great marriage that lasted you 10 years and the last 6 months were kind of crappy and you ended up leaving the marriage and now we call it a failed marriage. But wasn't it really truly a successful marriage for 9 years? And then a tough year? Isn't it completely possible that somebody could have 4 successful marriages? Because let's just be clear about what happened with marriage. Marriage was invented for a reason. And it was invented at a time when we did not live so long. Romeo and Juliet were 12 and 14 years old. And they were mature enough about love to kill themselves over it. Like they were going to, like it was a different world back then. If you got to 35, look, if you're going to get married at 20 and you're going to live to 30, it's not that big a commitment, right? But that's not how it is anymore. And so the reality is people are going to evolve and they are going to change. And so what I'm saying to you is, was there anything good about the last relationship? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was. So don't let go of it. Cherish it. Accept that it's over and recognize that it was good. And it may have ended not nicely, but thank God it's over now. And now you're ready for the next thing. And guess what? Well, here's another one. And this is a tough question. I don't know the answer. But how long was the last relationship? How long did it last?
3 years.
Okay. And how long was it good for before it wasn't good anymore?
A year, perhaps.
A year. So here's the lesson. Would you ever let yourself do that again?
No.
Right, you wouldn't. So you had a good year, but then you stayed in too long afterward. Is it true?
Yeah, we were trying to make it work, but
Yeah, you were trying to make it
didn't
work,
work.
but there was a point potentially where it was beyond the point. I don't know. But what I'm saying now is, would you let it go on that long again? So when you're ready to start the next relationship, would you go into that relationship? And if after a year it was great, but then it was immediately not good and you couldn't fix it, would you allow 2 years of not good? Would you allow that ever again?
definitely not.
No. So you got nothing to be afraid of. You're ready for the next one already. You don't want to let go of the last one. You want to learn from it. And I think it sounds like you already did learn from it. So let me ask you another question. If you knew that the next relationship was going to be totally fantastic, I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like really fantastic. If you just knew that, if you really knew that it was going to be amazing for 14 months and then it was going to have to end, but it was going to be really fantastic for that 14 months, would you maybe be willing to go in?
I'm not sure, no.
That's
Because
the
I want
point.
it to last longer.
Yes, you want it to last longer. And I realize there's other issues like wanting to maybe get married and have a child, but that's what you kind of, I think, need to let go of. You need to let go of the idea of the ultimate outcome. It has to be the summit. It has to be the end. Because it was a kind of a trick question. Because if it was really that fantastic for over a year, the odds are you can keep it going in that direction. I want you to recognize that you have learned enough, I'm hoping, from that last relationship to not repeat those mistakes. That's what I'm really trying to suggest. That's what I'm really trying to get at. Does it make sense?
Yes, kind of. Well,
And one more thing.
It's easy to say, but it's difficult to
Yeah,
do
it is.
really.
It is. But there's one more thing. Were you using counselors or relationship advisors or anything like that when you in your last relationship?
No.
No? So, what I want to suggest to you is that you do that the next time. That when you're in a relationship that you think is valuable, that the better the relationship is, the sooner you get a counselor. And I know that sounds weird, but I was talking to some friends of mine a couple of weeks ago, and I had a kind of interesting experience where they'd been married for about 6 months, and then they were talking, and they go, "Yeah, our therapist said," and I said, "You have a therapist? Why do you have a therapist?" And they said, "Because with our relationship." I go, "But are you guys having troubles? Are you having problems?" And they said, "No, because we have a therapist." You know, what I got from that was that just like, I'll tell you a great secret of business is a good lawyer can save you so much money to help you not need a lawyer. And a good counselor, a good relationship advisor can help you so much to make sure you never need one if you do it in advance. And so what I want to suggest to you is that you be willing to go for amazing. You be willing to go for great. You be willing to do all that. And then when it starts to feel that way, you seek out help. You seek out the right relationship retreats and the right programs, and you get the support to help you hold on to it. Because I feel very often if people wait until it's disaster time, it's really difficult to fix. It's better to do that stuff preemptively, in my opinion. One more thing I want to say to you about this. Do you drive?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you drive on roads where there's cars coming down the other side of the road?
Definitely, yes.
You do that? And how do you know they're not going to come across the middle? How do you know?
Because there's a barrier. We have our own road.
So where you drive, there's always a barrier. It's never just paint? Or is it sometimes just paint?
Well, sometimes it's just
Sometimes
paint
it's only paint that
finish.
keeps them on their side of the road. How do you trust that? The paint's not going to... How do you drive knowing that these people are coming in the other direction and there's just paint? I mean, how can you trust that?
Hidden rules. I mean, we just know, right?
We know because we take it as a matter of faith. And what I want to suggest to you is that sometimes it happens that somebody crosses the line. And it's a travesty and it's horrible when it happens. But if you lived your life in fear of that, you'd never be able to get in a car again. You'd never be able to go anywhere. And what you're telling me is you're a little bit afraid of getting into a relationship because somebody might cross over the line. And what I'm saying to you is,
Exactly.
yeah, they might. But if you live with this fear, you may as well give away your car and live in a house and get lots of cats.
Okay.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. That was super fun. Really nice to see you.
Thank you.
All right. I don't know where the cats joke comes from, you guys. I don't know what that's all about. But anyway, so let's jump in here. We now have Katrine, who's going to be joining us. Katrine, we have you, and we're ready to hear from you. What is your question? Okay, I don't have sound coming from you for some reason, and I'm pretty sure it's on your side. Katrine, why don't you work on fixing that? And while you're fixing that, I'm going to have a quick chat over here with Audrey. And if you could fix your sound, we can see on our side once it's working. So keep trying, and we'll try and get you on the show.
Oh,
Hey,
I think
Audrey.
I
Audrey,
Oh,
we've
she
got
got
you.
it.
Katrine, we can hear you now, and I'm going to bring you back in a minute. Audrey, you're up. What's your question? How are you?
Okay, I got a question on health,
Okay.
and been doing a lot of focus on what's essential, and it always comes back to health. And so I've done a lot of work on this over a lot of gains. Shameless plug for WildFit. Started it last April and lost 20 pounds on WildFit, lost another 20 after. They have stayed off. Anytime I get a 5-pound raise, then I focus again, usually with the help of some of the people I went through it with. And we get back on track and it goes away again. It's fabulous. So I really appreciate that. It was the best investment I ever made. So
I really appreciate that. And social media team, grab that clip immediately.
So as I try to do a little more fine tuning, I've been really soaking in, synthesizing all the interviews you've been doing, watched a series of things over this weekend on soil health and getting out in the sun and just trying to distill it. So there's a few things that are still kind of ongoing that I'd really like some help. Just a couple tips of what direction you would go in. It's primarily inflammation and joint pain and allergies and all that kind of stuff. And so when I put together these presentations I've been listening to, I've been getting my hands in the dirt, doing more gardening, getting out in the sun more. So the diet is pretty much there. What are the top 3 next things you would focus on to try to bring this into better being?
All right. This is not maybe the ideal subject for some people because it's, well, here's what I mean by that. I'm pretty sure that probably most of the issues you're talking about are because of plants. Plants are a very funny thing in our diet world. And, lately there's this whole thing about you got to have a plant-based diet. You got to have a plant-based diet. And I have been known to annoy some of my veganista friends because I tell them I do have a plant-based diet. All of the food that I eat is either plants or eats plants. So I have a plant-based diet. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the rationale of the different types of eating that we do in the world and a little bit of evolutionary background that I think might be helpful. In WildFit, you'll know that we are not very happy about, we don't really like the New World plants, particularly, say, nightshades, plants from the Americas, that sort of stuff. We don't think they're a good idea on a regular basis. Now, the reason that we don't think they're a great idea is because they're in the new world and humans evolved in the old world. And so we are much better suited to digest and process old world plants than we are new world plants. My father asked me many years ago, and he's been one of the biggest influences on my development of WildFit, not so much because he was interested in diet and stuff, but two reasons. One is because he lost his dad very young, like when he had, I think he was 46 or something like that. And then he also had a heart attack around about that same age. And so he became really interested in diet around the same time I did, and he kind of became, in a sense, a bit of a guinea pig for us to be talking all the time about food. But bigger than that, he has been writing what I believe will be one of the most important books about human evolution and human history, our migration of people around the planet. And I say this because he asked me one day, he's a very critical thinker, he's really helped me refine a lot of my thoughts. And he said, Eric, why are you against New World plants, but you're okay with New World animals? It's a great question, isn't it? It's a great question. So I didn't like the question, and generally people don't like questions when they don't have an immediate answer to them. So I didn't like the question. But it forced me to dive into the WildFit philosophies and understand it better. And I knew that I felt like I was right about the way I felt about it, but I now didn't have the logic underpinning it. And so what I wanted to do is dive into the logic of it and try to understand it better. And so I started doing a bunch of thinking and reading and all this kind of stuff. And then I realized what it was. And it kind of comes down to this. Every living organism is trying to defend itself all the time. It's trying to defend itself all the time. It doesn't want to be eaten. The only real exception to that is fruit. Fruit kind of wants to be eaten. It kind of wants you to eat it, and then it wants you to transport its seeds somewhere else, either because you eat it and throw the seed away like a peach, or because, like with a strawberry, the seeds are so small that you can't, they just pass through you quickly and you poop them out, or like the grape, where the grape has made the seeds. You know what it's like? Here's a fun exercise. Everybody who's old enough to remember biting into a grape that had seeds in it, right now, everybody make the face that you make when you bite into a grape seed. Go ahead, do it. Make the face. You know what I'm talking about. There, come on, tighten it up. That's the face you make. And then, by the way, how long is it after that before you ever bite into another grape? Probably about a year. So the seeds are defending themselves because the fruit's saying, yeah, eat me, but transport my seeds for me. And that's effectively what the goal is. But every other organism is trying to defend itself against getting eaten. And so how do animals defend themselves from getting eaten? Well, they defend themselves by running, by hiding, by having teeth and claws, by having weaponry, by having camouflage. And some of them defend themselves biochemically. Some of them, very rare with animals to defend themselves biochemically, but some of them do. The skunk defends itself biochemically. The water buck in southern Africa defends itself biochemically. It produces an oil in its skin. So if a lion is chasing it, the oil won't stop the lion, but it allows it to go into the water because the oil stops crocodiles. So they can use chemistry to defend themselves. Plants also are defending themselves against getting eaten. They don't want to be eaten. They're defending themselves. So how do they do it? Well, they do it physically. They have claws. They're called thorns. There's bark that's thorns, leaves that are thorns, branches that are thorns, fruit that's thorns. There's a million different ways thorns have evolved to defend the plant. But mostly because plants can't attack you, they can't run. They do hide. Plants hide. They camouflage themselves. But because they can't attack you and they can't run away, they defend themselves mostly biochemically. And so all plants have chemicals in them that are trying to stop digestion, make them taste bad, make you feel yucky so you won't have. All plants are trying to do this. Old world plants, we've been eating them for so long that we've developed a relationship and we've gotten better at it. New world plants, we're not good at it at all. So if somebody's having chronic headaches, one of the things I'll always suggest to them, take potatoes out of your diet. It's the strangest thing, but I've had so many people with chronic migraines, they take potatoes out, headaches go away. If somebody's having really serious digestive issues, then we want to take a look at things like wheat, and we want to take a look at New World things like the nightshade plants. Now, what am I really saying to you? Inflammation, and often inflammation, I think is fair to say that it often falls into the autoimmune category. It's like the beginning stages of the body going, hey, I got to fight here. I believe that very often what that really is your body fighting some of the plant chemicals, the plant defense systems that have made their way into your body, and now your body's fighting against them. Now, in a normal, natural, seasonal world, you would never be able to eat one plant for so long, unless it was incredibly poisonous, for it to cause you a problem. But now in our world, we can get into eating one plant all the time. Like we can eat kale all the time, or we can eat spinach all the time. And if we do that, I think we set ourselves up for consequences. Here's one I can tell you for sure. If you eat kale or any of the cruciferous vegetables all the time, you are inhibiting the uptake of magnesium. So if you're not getting enough magnesium, it's going to mess with your sleep. If it's messing with your sleep, it's going to mess with your immune system, which may well contribute to inflammation, right? So, and also, so what I'm really trying to say is that there probably are plants that are irritating you. And there's two things you can do about that. Some of them, stop it. And others, step back from them a little bit. Make it more seasonal. Make sure that you're rotating them, that you're not eating them all the time. And then give your body a break from it. Very often, people, when they first become healthy, especially doing something like WildFit that actually works for them, like you said, a year later, it's just still, one of the challenges is you're like, I don't want to change anything. What worked, worked. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to have my Alka-Geyser every single day. I'm going to have my, okay, nobody ever told anybody to have an Alka-Geyser every single day. But if you do have the Alka-Geyser every single day, then you really want to change the ingredients from time to time. You don't want the same ingredients in there all the time, because what's going on is you're getting the good stuff from the plant, but then building up the bad stuff as well. Whereas if you eat a vegetable, if you eat a plant that is defending itself, you might get some of the toxicity. But if you don't eat it again for a few days or a few weeks, your body cleanses the toxicity out. It's okay. But if you eat it all the time, the toxicities are building up. Let's take a look at lectins, for example. If you eat, gluten is a lectin. If you're eating lectins, then the lectins go into your digestive system. They can slip through into the cells of your digestive lining. Now your stomach has to attack the lectins, but guess what? They're in the digestive lining, and now it's called autoimmune disease, and it's going to stimulate inflammation. So I would suggest to you that you want to be revisiting the quantity, quality, and variety of plants in your diet.
So when you talk about quality, that's, I think, where some of this came from. It was on these presentations about where our food comes from and the soil health. And so the thought occurred to me that maybe the next area I should be more geared towards is being more specific about where I'm getting my food, which I've switched to doing more organic, but that maybe some of this is just because I haven't gone full-fledged organic, and just there's maybe enough chemicals still in that food to produce that?
It could be, but I think that the chemicals in the plant are probably even more of an issue. I really do. Listen, I'm not like, I don't want you eating glyphosate if you can help it. I don't think it's a good idea. You know, if you can get organic or good stuff, that's really great. But I want to suggest to you that plants are actively defending themselves, so be careful. Like, here's an example, cucumbers. Look, I know that we put them in the Alka-Geyser. I'll tell you why they're there. They're really just there because they're liquid, and you need a little liquidity to get the blender going. The fact is, the cucumber is a fruit. It's not a vegetable, it's a fruit, and it's got all the seeds inside it, and around the seeds are plant defense mechanisms. And so they're trying to protect those seeds from being digested. It's attacking your digestive system. If you eat them for a few days, a few weeks, okay. But if you eat them longer than that, there's going to be a problem. Tomatoes. Tomatoes are a fruit, not a vegetable. And underneath the skin of the tomato and around the seeds, there's heavy concentration of lectins that are there to protect the seeds, to get them out into the world. If you eat tomatoes, you're eating those lectins, and you're going to cause inflammation and autoimmune potential problems if you do it all the time. If you do it Tuesday, but you didn't do it for another 2 weeks, it's not a problem. So yes, you should be going for organic, but you should also be going for variety.
Perfect, thank you. And if you get a chance sometime, just writing on that financial freedom question, it would be really, it'd be nice to have some guidance on where someone starts to get into the investment. I mean, you don't have time to learn everything about everything. So how do people even start in the small scale to get wise investments that will do something that gets you to that financial freedom?
I will give you a little bit on that right now. Get rid of all your debts. Never have debts.
They're gone.
Good deal. I'm amazed that so many people try to start investing while they got debts going on. The fact is that if you've got a 20% credit card, you're never going to find a bond or a stock that gives you 20% with any kind of consistency. So by paying off your debts, you're making 20%. So you've got that piece. Then the next piece is really just look at index funds. right now, if you want to start stepping into the markets, I would just take a look at the various index funds. You can just buy the S&P 500. Now they might crash more. Don't buy because I'm telling you. This is not investment advice. It's just you ask, where's a basic place to begin? Well, you can just buy the index fund, and then you can just ride the stock market. You don't have to worry about the performance of any one company. You've spread the risk out, and that's probably a really great place for people to start. I also recommend the book Rule 1 Investing. Rule 1 Investing, written by my very good friend Phil Town, who we're hoping to get lined up here on Thrive Time very soon. He is a phenomenal speaker, but he's also a genuinely successful investor. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of people out there that pretend to be teaching investing, but most of them make their money teaching investing. That should tell you something. Now, Phil does teach investing now, but I think he does it largely as a public service because he runs like a $75 million fund. He's a serious investor. So Rule 1 Investing, fabulous book, really great place to get started.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Hey, you're so very welcome. I know that we're getting close toward the end here, but I know that we had Katrine on. I want to try and get her on here. So hang on with me. We're going to jump in here. Katrine, I think you're live and I think your sound is working. So let's say hello.
Hey, my question is, we talked about enjoying the journey, but what if you enjoy the journey so much that you never get to do the thing you were supposed to? For example, I want to get my video course out for years now, but then again, you can study how to make the sales letter, you can study all the different plugins, all the different tools for it, and see, the day has passed. Okay, let's try again tomorrow.
Yeah, you do have to kind of balance progress. I think it's really important to do that. I can be very guilty of the very thing you discussed. I often say that I know a little too much sometimes about technology and stuff like that. So if you were to ask Kelsey or my team, they would say that I probably in some ways could achieve even more if I didn't know all the technology, because then I would just hand that over to somebody and get it done and spend more time doing this kind of thing that I like. But I enjoy the technology, and so I like to do it sometimes. One of the things I might suggest for you is to create specific milestones of specific things you want to achieve that you can measure, kind of like I did with the financial freedoms. If you're trying to get your video course out, then create these different waypoints where you go, once I've done this, it's successful. Once I've done that, it's successful. Once I've done that, it's successful, and all the way up, rather than thinking the only success is the end. So here's an example. You want to create a video course. Well, one of the things you should probably create is a curriculum plan. Do you have one? Okay, great. Good. That's successful. Then once you've created a curriculum plan, you need to plan the videos. Do you have a script or bullet points for each of the videos in the program? Great. Create that. That's your next thing. Then you have to build this. Then you have to build that. Create a list of it. And in a sense, it's almost like an asset list. And you get to tick off each asset as you've built it. And here's one more thing, Katrine. I know we've got to cut it short because the show is wrapping up very shortly here, but I just want to say this. Really good art is almost never finished. It's generally just abandoned. A painter eventually abandons the painting. An author eventually abandons the book. Because frankly, any author will tell you they can keep rewriting. They can keep rewriting, and they can keep rewriting. And so what I want to suggest to you is that you might be doing some of the same things. You might be striving for a level of perfection that's unreasonable or unfair. What I want you to do is maybe do it like this. Create your asset list, and then you create a 1, 2, or 3 beside it. And then you give it a 1 when you've done the minimum viable product. And you try to get as many 1s as you can before you then start perfecting them and moving them to a 2. And here's the one thing. You do not ever work to push something to 3 until everything is 2. Do you understand? You don't do anything to a 3 until everything is a 2. Because the thing is that you'll pick the one thing you like the most, take that to a 3, but you'll never get past a 1 on the other stuff, and then you'll never have a digital product. And let me just tell you why you want to do this. The freedom associated with having digital assets is unlike anything you can imagine. I want you to know that right now I get to help thousands of people all around the world who never even meet me because they do my digital programs. It is one of the greatest gifts that we have in our world today, that we can take the knowledge that we have, and we can take that knowledge and take it and put it into an evergreen digital product, and then people can buy it and change their lives. And you can make money while you're sleeping, or kiteboarding in my case. So I want you to create the list of progress, then rate them 1 to 3 on where you are on them, And you do not take anything to a 3 until everything is a 2. And one more clue. Once everything is a 2, you can launch it. You can take it to a 3 on the second run. Thank you so much for coming on the show. For all of you guys out there in the audience, I want to say thank you so much for joining me on the show. I really love having an audience live like this. It really adds a lot. For those of you who are still in the waiting room with a question, Kelsey, please take the names of those people and try and prioritize them next week to get their questions answered. I am so thrilled to be in a position and in a world where we get to come together in a digital medium like this and really get to connect even though we're under lockdown. I want to wish you guys the very, very best lockdown you could ever have, and I want to help you be as prepared as you can be for post-pandemic life, and I want you to have as much fun as you possibly can throughout your whole life. Thanks so much for coming to Thrive Time.